Thanks everybody for joining us here today, and thank everybody who is watching online, and especially thank those of you who told me that we were streaming and I should stop talking about my shoes. But I'm Erica G. I'm a partner at Wright Lindsey Jennings, and we are very happy to be partnering again with the Venture Center on this program. They're great partners of ours, and particularly with the Women Run initiative, which is something the firm is very proud of, to support and encourage women entrepreneurs, but it does not have to be women. Thank you, men, for joining us today. Our topic for today is applies to everyone, man, woman, and child, I would say. And we are happy to have Kerry Locke join us of KLauckwork. And I'm going to let Kerry tell you a little bit about herself, but Kerry.
Yes, so I'm Kerry Locke. I was a lawyer for 21 years here in Little Rock, and that's how Eric and I actually know each other. We met early on in my law practice here in Little Rock, and in the summer of 21, I made the decision to leave law and do mindfulness full time. Mindfulness is something that I've done as a volunteer on the side for about a decade, and then decided last summer that I was going to do this full time as my career.
It's a huge leap.
It's a huge leap.
I mean, and I can tell you, being an attorney, almost every attorney I know has this fantasy of leaving the practice of law and doing something different.
Indeed.
But you actually did it. So
I did.
Before we get into how you left the practice of law to start your business, I'd like you to talk a little bit about how you got introduced to mindfulness.
Okay, so as part of my own mental health journey, back in the middle of, it was around 2009, I just realized that there were lots of things that I wasn't able to manage on my own. I didn't have the right tools in order to deal with a lot of the big emotions that I was dealing with. And so I sought some help from a mental health therapist. And one of the first things that she introduced me to was mindfulness. And it was something that literally was a game changer for me. I try hard not to overstate the benefits of mindfulness, but it's sort of hard not to overstate the benefits. It was a huge just catalyst in my life for change and for growth. And by virtue of doing it myself, I started sharing it with friends, I started doing it with family members, and within a few years, I found myself volunteer guiding it at a men's prison here in Little Rock. And then the rest is sort of history from there.
So I'm going to ask you a dumb question.
Well, I don't think there are any dumb questions.
Okay.
But
well, so is mindfulness and meditation the same thing?
So mindfulness and meditation are not technically the same thing.
Okay.
So all meditation practice is a mindfulness practice, but not all mindfulness practices are meditation.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Okay, so there are lots of different ways to practice mindfulness, but I think I should probably tell you first what mindfulness is.
Okay.
So mindfulness is basically the act of dropping into the present moment with an attitude of acceptance and curiosity for what you find in the present moment, both around you and inside you. And you're doing it in the service of self-understanding and wisdom. It allows you to be able to sort of shift your perspective from perhaps how you've been seeing yourself and the world around you. It's also a way to have more clarity of mind. It's a way to better solve problems and to have more information about making better decisions in your life.
That's an excellent definition. I don't know that I've ever asked you that before.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever really described it outright to you.
I don't think you have.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're on a journey together.
Yes,
right?
indeed we are. Yes.
All right. Well, so you volunteered at a men's prison.
Mm-hmm.
You began, Tell us where that took you.
Well, so it's sort of a small community of people who do this sort of work in a place like Arkansas. I mean, on the coasts and in big cities, mindfulness is widely practiced. In fact, there are about, I think, 75% right now of large companies in North America have a mindfulness program in their workplace.
Really?
Yes. I mean, that is a huge number. In Arkansas, not so much. And so it was something that the reason that I got into teaching it at the prison is because there was a woman who guided this class, and she got sick and she couldn't find anybody to guide it. And someone recommended me to her. We didn't know one another. And I said, I've never done this before. Like, I have my own practice, but I've never guided anybody else in practice, which is a big leap. I mean, it's a big deal, I think, to translate and bridge it to doing it personally, to doing it with somebody else. But I just jumped right into the fire and just did it. And because it's such a small community of people, my name, was bandied about pretty quickly. And another group that did classes at the Fletcher Library asked me if I could help them. So I started volunteer guiding there. And then that led to a group wanting to start a mindfulness group at the Pulaski County Jail. And so I started a group there and trained volunteers, and that's still a program that's running today. And in fact, is one of the most well-attended programs in Pulaski County Detention Center history, which is fantastic. And then I got certified to teach in the schools. So I did it at my son's school. And in fact, I'll be doing a program at Central High in 2 weeks. And then I'm trying to think where else. My church, I've done classes there. And then, of course, with family and friends, I've continued to do it. I see some faces that I've done it with in this group. So
it was not as big of a leap as it might appear from the outside.
Yeah, from the outside, it does appear like a really big leap, but it's something that really intrinsically I knew I wanted to do at some point full time. The pandemic for me, like probably most of you, turned my world upside down, and it turned my workplace upside down. And I think I used the word catalyst earlier. It was a real crisis in my workplace, and one in which really took me to the place of, okay, do I want to keep doing this? Do I want to stay here? Not only do I want to stay here in this workplace, but do I want to stay in law? And the answer was no. And so I did take a big leap, though, leaving. The practice of law. Sure. Really not only my work, but my identity in many, many ways. And so, yeah, it was a really big leap, but one that I'm very happy I took.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, stepping off that entrepreneurial cliff is a big deal for anyone.
Yes.
I'm sure a lot of people can relate to here.
Yeah.
But so when did you start KLauckwork?
Well, so I left the law in June of 21, and I took a couple of months off just to sort of find my deepest center, so to speak. I wasn't certain exactly how this was going to look. I had never been an entrepreneur before.
Right.
I had never been a small business owner before. I've always worked for someone else. Since I was 14 years old. And so through just the evolution of time last summer, the answers just sort of came. One morning after my mindfulness practice, I was writing in my journal, and in the margin, just the word KLauckwork just sort of came out. My first name's Kerry, my last name's Locke, and when you put my first initial with my last name, it sounds like clock. So I have friends that sometimes will call me that just because it's funny. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I think that's it. I think that's what I'm going to do. And so it just sort of unfolded from there. And then I opened officially in September of 22, or 21 rather. And so this past week marks my 6-month anniversary. So
Congratulations.
thank you so much. Yeah. And I tell you, 3 months into it, I was like, oh, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is not happening. Oh my gosh, and this is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
You know, small business is a big deal. It really is, and especially as a female. You know, I don't want to overstate the things that women do in the home, but we do a lot in the home, and it is a lot of times we're carrying a whole lot, and so it's a lot to manage a home and a child and a small business, but it's working, and I'm doing it. So yeah, 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
Well, before we get a little more into discussion about mindfulness, I want you to take a moment and tell us what you do in KLauckwork. What services do you offer?
Yes. So I provide mindfulness training for individuals, for groups, and also for workplaces. Workplaces is the primary focus of the business. And I work with entities small. I mean, I'm working with a group right now that the entirety of the staff is 7 people. And then I have another group that I'm about to start working with that is 100 people. And then there's another group I'm working with this summer that's going to be 600 people. And so it's just all sizes of businesses. The most effective way to do this work in the workplace is over a series of 10 weeks. It's 5 sessions every 2 weeks, because the neuroscience behind mindfulness is clear that it takes 10 weeks of practice in order to begin to see neural changes to the stress response in our brain. And so we go through everything from just an understanding of what mindfulness is and about how it impacts the stress response and how it can create better resilience to stress, to adversity, to rapid change. We go through the neuroscience of mindfulness and what that looks like and why it works, how it impacts the 4 main systems of the brain. We talk about emotional intelligence and the importance of emotional intelligence in the workplace, being able to understand and manage your emotions so that you are able to better communicate interpersonally with other people. We talk about managing challenges and exercising self-control, impulse control. And we talk about the importance of being in good relationship with yourself first, so that then you can be in good relationship with other people.
One of the things that I really enjoyed learning from you about mindfulness is the science behind it. I know some of you are thinking this is kind of woo-woo, right? Not looking at anybody in particular. But there really is a lot of clinical data and a lot of studies to show the benefit that this can have. And you talked about it a little bit.
Yeah.
I'd like to see if you could talk about that a little more.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I am very cognitive. Like I think probably most of you are. I think most of you are probably professionals. And so it has been always very important to me to understand the neuroscience behind it, just so that I could, I'm very much an overthinker, which is why mindfulness has helped me so much. It's crazy. And so it has basically allowed me to learn how to drop out of that overthinking. The neuroscience is clear. And when I first started doing this in 2009, there were only on average, about 500 in that year alone, researched, published and peer-reviewed articles on mindfulness. By 2020, there were over 1,100 in that year. So essentially, what happens is our amygdala, which is the reptilian part of our brain, The amygdala is something that all of us have. And that is where our stress response lies. And when we are faced with a stressor, our amygdala goes into action. That's our fight or flight, fawn, or there's one more, fight, flight, fawn, or flee. Those are our 4 stress reactions. And what mindfulness does is it interrupts that stress reaction so that we move out of our amygdala and move into our prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the gray matter of the brain. That's the part of the brain that is responsible for emotional control, logic, planning. And so mindfulness allows us to not get hijacked, essentially, by the amygdala, so that we're working out of the prefrontal cortex. So doing a mindfulness practice very quickly can move you out of a state of acute stress because it shifts you from your sympathetic nervous system into your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest part of our brain and our body. And that's where we want to be. We don't want to be in the sympathetic. That is where we are fighting and fleeing. And so it, over, like I mentioned earlier, a period of 10 weeks, you begin to realize the long-term effects of the practice. Like I said, a practice allows you to, in the short term, calm the stress response. But over time, you are laying down new neural pathways in the brain. It's like, I liken it to cutting a pathway through a dark forest. So you do this practice when you feel good and when you feel bad, and you're cutting a new path through the forest so that then when you are faced with a stressor in your life, you are more likely and more easily able to go to that path through that dark forest that's now cut for you, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. I'm hoping that will you lead us through a mindfulness?
Sure, I will.
exercise?
Absolutely. You want to do it right now?
Sure.
Okay.
Are y'all
Yeah.
ready?
Yeah,
Those
let's
of you
do
watching,
it.
you've got to do it too.
Yeah, okay, so we're going to do it's a practice called STOP. It's an acronym for stop what you're doing, take 3 breaths, observe your mind, your body, and your environment, and then proceed. It is a practice that was developed at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center by who many consider the father of modern mindfulness, Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. And it is a way to very quickly interrupt the stress response. You can do it in times of, like I mentioned earlier, acute distress, but it's also something that you can just do throughout your day. A lot of times I will, in fact, I tell my son this, every time you see the word stop, use it as a visual cue and a reminder to yourself to do a stop practice. Like when you see a stop sign, you can do it. We're going to do it right now by closing our eyes, but you can do this anytime without closing your eyes. And I'll guide you through it. You don't have to remember all the things I just said.
That's good.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so begin by, which I can't really do in this chair, putting both feet on the floor. So if your legs are crossed, just put both feet on the floor. You can rest your palms. If you've got arms on your chairs at home, you can rest your arms on the arms of your chair. You can just rest them on your thighs. Palms up, palms down, doesn't really matter. If you're comfortable, you can allow your eyes to close. If you're not, you can leave them open. It's perfectly fine, whatever you want to do. If you want to leave your eyes open, you can just focus your attention gently at a spot in front of you. We are taking this time to stop what we're doing and connect with our intention to slow down in this moment. And so begin by taking 3 mindful breaths. And all that means is paying attention all the way through the in-breath and all the way through the out-breath 3 times. I'm going to begin by observing the state of your mind, observing what thoughts are passing through, like a detached observer, like you are not a part of your mind, but you are just observing these thoughts. Observing your mood. And then shifting into an observance of your body. Feeling your feet on the floor. Noticing how the surface of whatever you're sitting upon is supporting you. Noticing any areas of tension or ease. Again, just like a detached observer, not getting entangled within it, but just observing it. And finally, observing your environment. What sounds you might notice. Perhaps how the air feels on your skin. And whenever you're ready, opening your eyes to proceed.
Like how the air shifted.
Right at that exact
Right at that exact moment.
I timed that.
That's really good.
Yeah.
You must be a professional.
What'd you think about that?
I really like that meditation,
You did?
or mindfulness practice.
Yes, mindfulness practice.
And one of the things that I really enjoy about doing this in a guided manner with you is that just your voice is so peaceful. It kind of takes me to a really nice place. Everybody's nodding. Everybody.
I'm glad.
Yeah. So that was, I think, a great introduction. Can we talk a little about some other ways to practice mindfulness?
Absolutely. And so during a course of 5 sessions in the workplace or as an individual, what we do is we focus each session on a different area of the brain. So that session that we just did is a part of the brain called the resilience system. That is the part of the brain that that allows us to be calm and maintain our composure in a time of crisis. There is a longer practice called awareness of breath. That is another resilience practice, is one in which you are just aware of your breathing. And you use touch points within your body to focus on, and of course I guide through each one of these practices. I guide through. Then we do the attention system, and that is a body scan meditation or mindfulness practice. And that is a practice in which you begin with your feet and go all the way to the top of your body, and you scan each part of your body. And it's a particularly powerful mindfulness practice. It's one that some people actually use to go to sleep at night. These practices are ones I like to call practices of falling awake, not falling asleep, but you can use a body scan. Yeah, a body scan as a way to fall asleep. In fact, the Department of Defense teaches it to soldiers as a way to be able to fall asleep anywhere they are. In fact, the Department of Defense uses resilience practices and focused attention practices as part of their training in all branches of the military. Then we work on the meta-awareness system of the brain, and that is the system of the brain that is responsible for the ongoing narrative that most of us are engaged in. Some neuroscientists call it the story of me. It's this entanglement with past and future thinking, which is where we spend about 47% of our time during a day, which means we're not actually present.
The story of me.
The story of me.
Mhm.
And so that practice is, one of those practices is called thought labeling, where you begin to become aware. You create your own labels, and they could be as simple as judgmental, non-judgmental, planning, worrying, that sort of thing. And it allows you to become more aware of your patterns of thinking so that you can then shed the thoughts and the patterns of thinking that are not helpful for you. We do then a practice called Cultivating Compassion, and that is a practice that is designed to impact the connection system of the brain. The connection system of the brain is basically the empathetic part of the brain, the ability to see someone else's perspective, the ability to tend and to befriend not only ourselves when we're in crisis, but to be able to tend and befriend someone else when they're in crisis. And so the goal of offering all of these different kinds of practices is because they impact different areas of the brain, even though each practice actually impacts the entirety of the brain, it impacts particular areas more. But all of us are different at the end of the day. And some of us might respond more to an awareness of breath practice. Some of us might respond better to a body scan practice. And so I offer sort of a menu of options so that then people can pick and choose what is most resonates with them, essentially.
Are there other ways to practice mindfulness throughout your day?
Yes. So another thing that I didn't mention, another formal practice that I guide is mindful walking. For many of us, just sitting and doing some of these practices is not what works best for us. And you don't have to just be, to go back to your original question, is mindfulness meditation? It isn't just that. It is movement, so mindful walking. It is also just gentle stretching exercises that you can do sitting or standing. But one of the reasons that I guide these formal mindfulness practices is because it begins to teach your brain to operate in a different way. Over time, you begin to bridge these formal practices and weave them seamlessly into your day-to-day life so that when you're making coffee, you're actually making coffee. You're not somewhere else.
Thinking about what you have to do tomorrow.
That's right, or thinking about what you're going to have for dinner that night, or whatever.
What you messed up yesterday.
Exactly, yes, exactly, all the things.
All the things. I
Yes.
can keep going.
Yes, oh, I mean, we all could keep going. I mean, most, like I said, 47% of the time, we're somewhere else. In fact, there's a quote from a James Joyce book, The Dubliners, and it's about the main character, Mr. Duffy, and it says that Mr. Duffy lived a short place away from his body. Because most of us, our mind is somewhere far away from where our body is. And these practices are about the alignment of body and mind. So anything essentially that you're doing and your body and your mind are aligned is a mindfulness practice. So I would invite you to consider that if you are a gardener, for example, when you are fully immersed in the act of gardening and your mind is on what you are doing, that is a mindfulness practice. It's an informal mindfulness practice. A lot of the things that I talk about in workplace sessions are how to bridge these practices into the workday. So mindful emailing, mindful texting, mindful speaking, mindful listening. And one of the first ways that we can do that is to practice embodiment. I don't know if any of you have ever heard that phrase before, but
I don't think in the way you're using it.
yeah,
no.
so I've practiced it throughout the time that I've been sitting here today. It's so easy for us, and I know you all know what I'm talking about, to get caught up in your head and lose your train of thought, or to, nerves start to rise up. So anytime that has happened for me while we've been sitting here today, I've practiced embodiment, which just means I drop into my body. I drop out of my brain and into my body. I do it by feeling the surface of what I'm sitting on, the heaviness of my hands, and immediately I'm calm. And so try that. Try that the next email you send. First, practice embodiment. Drop into your body and see how it changes the action that you take.
So is that what you mean by mindful emailing and mindful texting? Because I got to tell you, my reaction, like, what?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Much more. So much of what this practice is about is moving from a state of reactivity to response. What we want to do is to mindfully choose our actions. So it's a way to pause, to notice the state of your mind, what you're feeling, what you are about to do. If you are angry, if you are impulsively about to react to something, to be able to notice that, and then to be able to choose. Do I want to take that action?
Do I want to send that email?
For example,
Yeah.
yes, no, at the Oscars the other night.
Oh,
So, this is a very timely issue. If he had done a simple mindfulness practice, for example, the stop practice, and I did that a longer way than I normally do it. I wanted us to experience a little short practice. I usually do that practice in under 45 seconds. He could have done that in 45 seconds or less.
before he got up out of that
And
chair.
don't you think he
Yeah.
probably would have stopped himself from going up and slapping somebody on a stage of his colleagues? No matter what you think about what he did, I'm not drawing any judgment about what he did, but I think he might have taken a different act. I think he might have approached Chris Rock a little differently. In fact, I think if Chris Rock had done some mindfulness work before, he might not have made the joke that he made. Again, no judgment on what the joke he made, but he might have made a different decision. And that is their workplace too.
Mhm.
That is their job. They're actors. He was in a complete auditorium full of his peers.
Mhm.
And
And
so.
an international TV audience.
Indeed, yes, indeed. And so it's a way to respond to a situation. And so to your question about mindful emailing and texting, it definitely can change the tone of what you send, of what you do. And, to take that a step further, our actions today are what create our tomorrow. This is so much about winding back to the beginning and looking at what we're doing in our lives. Are we doing what we want to do? Our thoughts become our actions. Our actions become our behaviors. Our behaviors become our habits, and our habits become our life. And so this is a way to drop it all the way back and to begin to look at your thinking.
What kind of person do you want to be?
I want to be a mindful person.
There you go.
I want to be a person who chooses my actions.
I think you're succeeding.
Well, I hope that I am.
So if somebody listening here today has never practiced any sort of mindfulness except for what we just did a little while ago, how would you suggest that they get started? Where do you begin?
So I think that if you wanted to start on your own, one of the best ways to do it is to begin when your eyes open in the morning. The science shows that more cortisol is released at that time than any other time of the day. As you begin to scan your day with your thoughts, you are flooded with stress hormones.
Get you up and going.
It's to get you up and going. However, we don't live in a cave where there's a saber-toothed tiger that might be right there. Okay, so that's what our amygdala is pushing us to do, is to act, scan for threats, make decisions that will save us. Well, we don't have to do that anymore. And so interrupt that process by spending just 2 minutes as you lie in the bed, just concentrating on your breath. In, out, for 2 minutes. That's it. And just see, do it for 14 days and see how the next 2 weeks change. When you get to work, if you go to work or if you go to a home office, spend 5 minutes just sitting. You can just sit with your breath again. What I do is I spend 5 minutes counting to 10 over and over and over. That is actually a Department of Defense trick. They teach it to recruits. It's a way, again, to shift out of the sympathetic nervous system into the parasympathetic. It just starts your day off on a really wonderful note. Then take a break every hour. Take a performance break. It could just be a minute or 2 minutes. I have a timer on my phone that just, it's a very quiet little thing because I don't want a lot of distractions. That's another tip. Try to silence your distractions throughout the day. And then set boundaries around your time, around your tasks. Then at the end of your day, spend about 5 minutes doing the same thing you did at the beginning of the day. That's just a very simple way to start this and to impact not only yourself, but your work day.
So if you're a person like perhaps me, who's worried that I'm going to do it wrong.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Is there a way to do it wrong?
There's not a way to do it wrong. And I'm so glad you asked that question. For the first couple of years that I did this practice, I did not have a teacher. Like I mentioned, my therapist recommended it to me, but I was really doing it on my own. I was reading books. But I didn't have someone to talk to about it, to tell me, hey, Kerrie, you're doing it right. Because I thought I was doing it wrong because my mind was what Jack Kornfield, he's a mindfulness researcher, calls your thought factory. It's literally just nonstop. So I would be trying to sit in quiet with my breath.
You're supposed to stop all that, right? You're supposed to just have like a blank, sunny field.
That's what most people think. That is not the goal. The goal is just to observe what's happening and to continue to interrupt the thinking. We're not trying to stop our mind. We are just trying to take a break from our mind. Our mind is almost always trying to help us. And so that's what I try to remember. But I use humor too, like with myself, like, okay, you know what? It's okay. That little list of things to do is going to be there later. I could get to that later and come back. One of the attitudinal qualities of a mindfulness practice is beginner's mind, beginning again and again and again. And so that is what the practice is. It is perfectly normal for your mind to be going in a million directions. And that's something that I talk with students about, that it doesn't matter if you have what you feel like is a good mindfulness practice or a bad mindfulness practice. It's kind of like physical exercise. When you go out for a walk or a run or whatever you do, you might end that session and go, man, that was great. But you might also end it and go, God, that was terrible. But guess what? You still exercised at the end of the day. It's the same way for the mindfulness practice. It's not the quality of it, it is that you are doing it.
The consistency.
It is the consistency of it. Yep.
I was listening to a podcast with James Clear and Brene Brown and he was talking about how we value intensity over consistency.
We do.
And what a mistake that is. And that's something I had never really thought about before, but I think that's the same thing you're saying.
It is absolutely that. Yeah. We are, as humans, our brains are wired to look for the big things. Again, it goes back to
the saber-toothed tiger.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. And so we do tend to thrive on intensity. It's what neuroscientists call the negativity bias. I mean, it really, even though that intensity could be positive, at the end of the day, it's not doing great things for our brain. And so these practices help to offset that tendency to worry, to seek things that are not necessarily good for us.
One of the ways that I think about it is as a parallel to a conversation I often have with my clients, which is you need to get a 30,000-foot view. You need to rise above the minutia of what is happening right now and think about what are your objectives, what are your goals, because we tend to get so caught up in the day-to-day or the minute-to-minute. And of course, that's very easy for me to say to them. Oh, yeah. But that's one of the ways that I think about it when we've had these conversations, and that helps me kind of visualize where we're going.
It absolutely does. And I'm glad you brought that up too, because perspective is what it's all about. One of my teachers used the example once about how when you're in the car and the rearview mirror is so important to be able to see the traffic around you, and how all it can take is a tiny little shift, like your child can hit it or you can accidentally hit it, and then you can't see anything that you need to see. Sometimes it's a very slight shift in that perspective that can make everything clear again. And so this is an opportunity to look at things, to be able to look at your perspective and see, do I need to make big adjustments or do I need to make little adjustments? And those things are always changing. As we evolve, as we change, our perspectives change. And this is a practice. I mean, that's why we call it a practice. It's something that you do for the rest of your life. It's not, and exercise is the same way. I think when I first started doing this, I thought, okay, I'm just going to get to like this place where I'm not even going to need this anymore.
You're done.
I'm done. Yeah. I've got all this comfort. I've got all this figured out. It's not that way.
Yeah.
It's in the same with exercise. You don't reach a pinnacle of physical performance and go, okay, I'm there. Great. Done. Check. You continue to maintain that. It's the same with this. Yeah, so it's a lifestyle. But again, it's comforting to know that you don't have to spend 2 hours a day doing it. The science is clear that about 10 minutes a day is where the benefits begin to inure. At about 40 minutes a day is when you sort of reach a diminishing return. And so there's a sweet spot in there that's pretty, it's different for everybody. For me, it's about 20 to 30 minutes a day.
Is that all at once?
That is not all at once. No, I do about 10 minutes in the morning, and I do about 10 minutes in the evening. And then I do my 5-minute when I get to work. I do my 5-minute at the end of the day. And that ends up being 20 to 30 minutes. And then, of course, I'm doing it all throughout my day. Not always successfully, of course. I mean, like, for example, last night, this is a great example. I just got a new disposer yesterday. My disposer went out yesterday morning, and thankfully the plumber could get there very quickly, and so he replaced it. And so I was making dinner last night, and I was cracking eggs. I was making a stir fry, and I realized as I was cracking the eggs that I hadn't looked at the new disposer. So what was I doing? trying to do two things at once, which is such an illusion. We cannot do two things at once. Our brains are not designed that way. And so, but I was trying to do that. And so what did I do? I cracked the egg into the sink instead of into the bowl. And I was just like, I mean, what a great example right here. I mean, you know, I am not perfect.
It's like
at
putting the
all.
keys in the refrigerator and the milk on the table.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of us are in autopilot. We are engaged in that constant, that narrative that's in our brain. And so it's shifting out of that narrative again and again and again.
Does it get easier?
It does get easier. It gets so much easier. Yes. And it's something that I can tell you all day long, but it is a really experiential practice. It's something that I think if you practice, you will pretty quickly see changes within your day-to-day life. But then over time, you are actually laying down different neural pathways in your brain. And our brains are completely neuroplastic and change right up until the day we die if we choose to do that. And so this is a choice to do that.
Well, I want to take a minute and see if anybody has any questions before we run out of time here. We do.
Yeah.
In our journey, we have fluctuates. There's times when high, there's times when low, there's times where how do you connect mindfulness when you have seasons where it's really low and you're like, oh, I'm doing everything right, but whether the environment or something else, you know, it's still very low. So how do you connect mindfulness to that?
It's a great question. I don't know if everybody on Zoom could hear that question, but essentially she asked how you can connect mindfulness with your own mental health journey and how it changes over time. And that's a great question. Mindfulness is a way to be with yourself instead of running away from yourself. One of the major qualities of a mindfulness practice is acceptance. And it is cultivating the ability to be with yourself when you feel low and when you feel high. And it is with practice comes an awareness that those seasons come and go. As you noted, I think that so many of us culturally, we've been conditioned, you know, by the media, by our family, by whomever, that feeling bad is bad. And feeling bad isn't bad in and of itself. That's part of being human. And so a mindfulness practice is a way to access that, begin to realize that it does pass, and also invites a greater awareness of our mental health so that if we are experiencing emotions that we cannot manage ourselves, we are more likely then to step out and ask for help.
It's a great question. Anybody else have a question?
Just more of a comment observation. You know, it's becoming more mainstream when my Apple Watch multiple times a day prompts me. I get that down and says, take a moment to be mindful.
Yes.
The actual words.
Yes, absolutely. And you didn't program that.
No,
It's coming up. Yes, exactly. Right. Well, and that's a great point. And for those of you on Zoom that didn't hear her, she said it's such a thing of the moment now that the Apple Watch is even automatically reminding us to be mindful. I mean, I saw a commercial the other night on TV with Simone Biles during the NCAA tournament. It's a Powerade commercial about the power of the pause. And that's what this practice is. Pausing, noticing, and choosing. And so, yeah, it is of the moment. It is everywhere right now. I think it's also what led to me finally deciding to pull the trigger and go ahead and do this. The pandemic sort of laid bare, I think, so many of the problems in our world. And it just felt like the right time to bring this to my community. We all need this. And I'm grateful that all of you are here today to learn more about it.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I've done mindfulness a couple of times, and I'm novice, so
Yeah.
take that with what you will, but I find that when I'm trying to calm my mind, I get a lot of different thoughts in my mind. If I don't write it down, I'm gonna forget to do it later, and I'll find myself doing that. Oh, I thought about that while I was having a quiet time, and I get to the end of my day and realize I've never circled back to think about that
Yeah.
again. So then I'm constantly interrupting myself with tasks and to-dos, and so that's part of my internal thinking is I'll be with myself and I'll think about my day and everything I need to do, and if I don't write it down, it's gone. So how do you kind of balance that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think at the outset, it's you are starting to recognize that when you slow down, the information you need comes. So you might, as you begin to practice, keep a notepad beside you. And if it's something that you feel like is very important, write it down. This is not a prescriptive, exact way of doing things. It's about your own self and about your own self-care. And so if for you, there are things that come up that continue to come up while you're sitting and you're afraid, I will not remember that later. I know I won't, and I need to remember that. Then give yourself grace and the opportunity to write it down and come back to the practice. Does that help? Okay.
Any else?
Can you go ahead and give Kerry?
Yes.
I try to meditate on a regular basis, and I've seen a lot of benefits in terms of like my memory recall, my ability to stay focused, and all of those things. Can you talk about that just?
Yes. Yes, I'm so glad you asked that question. So the benefits of a practice are vast. They can be vast. It's different for everybody. One of the major benefits is improved memory. It is the ability to remain focused in spite of distractions. The ability to maintain our attention despite other things that are pulling at us all the time. It allows us to be more innovative. It allows us to be more creative. It allows us to perform better. It allows us to sleep better. And I could keep talking and talking and talking and talking. It actually even has been proven to reduce unconscious bias. I mean, there are a myriad of benefits, both short-term and long-term. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, Pamela.
I really enjoyed the interview. This is a topic that's close to my own heart. I know that for the folks in the room, Kerry has left some of her cards and these wonderful flyers about what is mindfulness, and how to get, it's a little bit of information on here that I think is beneficial. I can't get it out. But for the folks that are on Zoom, what website can they go to?
So my website is KLauckwork.com, KLauckwork, and you can find out all the information about me, about how to schedule, and anything else that you might need.
Awesome. Thank you again, ladies.
Thank you so much.